Hey, this is Gerge with the Pragmatic Engineer, and today I'm going to talk about some of my confessions as a hiring manager. I've been a hiring manager for about 5 years at Skyscanner, later at Uber. I also know a lot of...
Oh, I gotta pause this for a quick second because I've never understood how to say this man's name, and he just said it.
Hey, this is Gerge with the Pragmatic...
Garage? Am I close?
Engineer, and today I'm going to talk about some of my confessions as a hiring manager. I've been a hiring manager for about 5 years at Skyscanner, later at Uber. I also know a lot of other hiring managers who I talk with, and I want to give a bit of perspective from the other side, and also some of...
Is he Irish? Is that what I'm detecting? What's this accent? There is a little bit of an accent. Hungarian? Fellow potato eater? Georgian? Protoss. Okay, you guys, is some kind of European. Oh no, he has. There's something in there.
Advice that you might find useful when applying for jobs at big tech. This can be from the likes of Uber.
Did he just throw in 2 audio tracks just then? Sorry, I got super confused there.
You might find useful when applying for jobs at big tech. This can be from the likes of Uber, Lyft, all the way to Google, Facebook, and other big tech companies. First, your experience with the recruiter themselves, it might not fully be indicative with the experience with the company. Now, this is an interesting one, and I've been talking with hiring managers.
The experience with the recruiter is not indicative of the experience at the company. I'm gonna go yes, no personally on this little item, which is yes, you gotta still remember that your company produced this recruiter, right? Your company said, hey, that's a great idea, recruiter. Go do that, right? Like that, you gotta remember that did happen at some point. At some point they said, that meets our bar, check mark, right? And so, that's all I have to say is, You know, little sus. I'm not too sure if I agree with this, but we'll keep going.
Hiring managers actually disagree with this, and they say that they think the recruitment experience will be representative of the company, which I somewhat agree with. Companies who care about employee well-being typically invest a lot in their hiring processes, so they will measure satisfaction of candidates going through the loop. They'll want to try to filter out recruiters who are not doing that great. So for example, if you're asked to rate what the process was like and you're getting reach outs for feedback, that probably means that that company cares about their employees and also their candidates.
Can you ever get good information from somebody who gets rejected? How was your process of being said no to? Great. I felt cared for every step of the way, specifically the part with my resume and the garbage. It's just like, do you really want that? The rejection made me feel better about myself completely. I felt like we were family. It's like family all over again. You just left for the cigarettes this time instead of dad.
And companies who do this definitely include the likes of Google, Facebook, and some other companies as well.
All right.
At Uber,
I will go
when I
1,
was
2,
there,
5.
we also started to do reach out, at least in my area, to see what candidates thought about the process. Now, at the same time, recruitment and engineering are 2 separate functions. They also report differently. Recruitment reports into HR, the HR side of the world, and engineering reports into the CTO or engineering. You're going to interact with the recruiter for a lot of time during the process. The engineering manager and the interviewers, they're going to have a dotted line with the recruiter. They're going to talk every now and then.
Welcome to Costco.
If you have a recruiter who, let's say, doesn't follow up all the time or is not as responsive, it might not mean that the company is like that. Now, what will be indicative of the culture is the interviewers. So the interviewers, engineers themselves, if they come across as not friendly or rude, or on the positive side, if they come across as nice people, curious, accommodating, that will be a lot more indicative of what you can expect at the company. So I would say pay a lot more attention to the engineers and the interviewers and the hiring managers you talk with on the process than the recruiters.
I also want to be fair that companies also will select out engineers in which, you know what I mean? Like, not every engineer is designed to work in the interviewing space, okay? Some of them are just regular Twitch chatters. Is what I'm trying to say right now is that some of them are your standard Twitch chatters, not necessarily useful during an interview process, but still, we can still appreciate them for who they are. You know what I mean? Arch users.
You might have also gone the other way. You might have had a really positive experience with a recruiter, someone who's really attentive. You might have had a really good feeling. Maybe they just made you feel really comfortable and feeling good about this place. And when you start, the team might just be different. Again, the recruiter doesn't work on the engineering team. They work with the recruiting team, and their goal is to try to help candidates as best as they can.
And there's another problem. There's some of these bigger companies that just spread out interviewing like wildly. Like take Google, for instance. Google will, they just have a hiring committee of people that go and they rate you on the most ridiculous things ever possible. And so if you don't write down perfect code on the whiteboard, if it doesn't execute, they're dinging you. They have this like super, hey, we will never be biased process. So therefore we have all these really stupid metrics in which we measure you. And at the end of the day, you like don't really meet the people on your team. You don't even know what you're getting yourself into. So you can't really even gauge like Google by their interviewing, which I think is a huge kind of blind spot for them. And it makes it really hard to want to accept a job there because you just don't even know what you're going to get. You know what I mean? You don't even know if it's going to be great or bad or good. You don't even know.
Another thing that few people know is after you've gone through the resume screening and you're talking with the recruiter and you're going to the phone screen interview, the recruiter will be on your side. They're going to be one of your biggest advocates. I've seen this multiple times. Now, this makes a lot of sense if you understand how recruiting works. A recruiter is given numbers to hit. They're told, hey, I want you to hire this many people in this quarter. It could be 10 people, 20 people. Here's the seats I want you to fill. And every time someone is hired, it's an achievement. As an engineer, you ship features, recruiters hire people. So whenever someone's in the funnel and they think this person has a chance, which is what...
Imagine you had a Jira bug that comes in, and when you're halfway through it, your teammates just throw your computer out the window. That's being a recruiter, by the way. It's just like everything's going good. You think you got somebody great, and then they just have to leave. And it's just like you got to restart that feature over and over again every single day. The true Sisyphus of life is the recruiter. Feels bad, hashtag. Can't imagine it.
Why they had them go through the resume screen. They're not just rooting for them, they want to help them. Now, the way you can take advantage of this is ask the recruiter for advice, for support, for insights. You can be honest with them on where you think you need help, and you can ask them for preparation resources. You can ask them for advice on where do people usually struggle in the process. Have you seen areas where you think it might make sense to focus on? Areas where the company is a bit more tough. You can
also you can even tell them like, hey, I don't do very great on whiteboard interviews, but I'm really good at take home. So if you give me a take home, I can also really show you how good I am. Right? I think it's good to always be like upfront about where you think your weaknesses are. Let people know. I think it's a good move. You know what I mean? I do think it's a really good move.
Ask them about the process. The recruiter will tell you as much about the process as they know because it's in their interest for you to do well. I know some recruiters who I worked with at Uber who actually coached some of the candidates. So they told them, hey, you should study this, you should look into this. They also quizzed them on a couple of questions, preparing them for the phone screen. Because if you do well as a candidate, it does make the recruiter look good. This is a similar misconception as sometimes people think their managers might be out there to get them. Maybe they're giving them poor performance reviews because they don't like them. As a manager, if people do well on your team and people get promoted, it makes you look really good. Same thing with big tech. With the recruiter, if you do well, it makes the recruiter...
Big tech, big guns, big alcohol. They're out there.
Look good, and they're going to be one of your biggest allies throughout the process. I've been on debriefs where the panel was a bit of a maybe, and the recruiter injected themselves, and they started to advocate for this person. I'm going to say that for 80% of the time, the recruiter will be your biggest ally throughout the process.
Do you think there's something wrong with the recruiter being an advocate for the position? Because if their performance is judged by how many people get hired, wouldn't that mean they have, in some sense, a corrupt incentive to be on your side? Just a thought, you know? Just kind of like a little, a little thought experiment. Do you want that opinion swaying anything? I think it's a little tricky. This is the downsides of freelance recruiting. Yeah, absolutely, I could see that. Do engineers have an incentive to agree on more features? No, they don't. If, as far as I can tell, every engineer, if you ask them what they want to do, they want to refactor. Every engineer, as time goes to zero, they're trying to refactor something. But they have to first build out this feature really quickly. Then they're going to refactor. This is the last feature, before they refactor. Well, yeah, Greenfield is just refactoring from your brain to the computer. That's why you like it so much, okay? That's why you like it so much, is that you get to actually just refactor your thoughts into code. It's the greatest thing ever. But then you learn what everybody else learns, which is that when you refactor from your brain to code, you write shitty apps. So then you have to refactor the shitty application. You just woke up. Damn, that's late for you. Aren't you on Central Time Zone too? Dang.
The other 20% is when you connect with someone at the interview. It could be the hiring manager. It could be another interviewer who really feel this connection. They feel you've done really well on that specific interview,
bro.
and they will fight for you. But that happens a lot more rare than the recruiter sticking the neck out for you. All right, the next topic is how to prepare for the big tech interview and what kind of mindset should you go.
By the way, this is, he was just talking about someone that's not the recruiter sticking their neck out for you. You know what a really simple way to help increase your ability to have somebody to stick out their neck for you? At the last 10 minutes of the interview, I want you to think back on the interview you just had and ask questions that are more personalized to the person. Because we've all had the person be like, all right, I would just like you to tell me, what does your day look like, right? You're like, oh, okay, okay, here we go. This is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. Okay, I would also like to wonder how our features decided. And, okay, this is, I mean, hey, you're back in the office. Did you teleport me? Can you not do that? I don't like this. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it, Karen! Anyways, come up with something that's like a little bit more, thoughtful. So what I usually like to do is during the very beginning, hey, how are you? Oh, what team are you on? You're on this team. Okay. I try to put like little things in my head. So at the end of the interview, when it comes down to it and I get a few minutes, I ask specifically about that team, right? You create a little bit of rapport. You know what I'm talking about? Make the engineer feel like you're kind of excited about what they do, right? Inflate the ego a little bit if you need to, right? Oh, wow, that sounds really hard. How long have you been doing that for, right? You know what? Everybody feels good when you say nice things, okay? You do, I do, we all do. You know that's a fact of life. I'm just saying, use some of those things to your advantage. It will be a good move, okay? I'm just saying. Try it out.
Go there with. So first, on preparation. I mean, these days, I don't think there's any excuse for you to not prepare on what you should be expecting on the on-site loop for any big tech. And it will be pretty similar. It'll be coding. You're going to be given exercises with data structures or algorithms. I'm talking to generalist software engineers. If you're interviewing for something specialist for like web or mobile, there might be something a bit more domain specific. But for the most part, even at big tech, even when we were hiring for mobile or web at Uber, we would ask the generalist questions in the phone screen. And
I got this interview at Uber. And the guy's like, tell me the running time of this algorithm. And I'm like, oh, the algorithm is this. And he's just like, ha ha! Incorrect. Property lookup in JavaScript is log n. So I was like, then it's n squared, log n. And he's like, damn it. How'd you know? I kid you not, that actually happened. It was like the worst experience I've ever had in my entire lifetime.
To prepare, you should probably get something like Cracking the Coding Interview. I've had multiple versions of this book.
I always recommend that book.
It just gives you the foundation on everything from data structures.
Go to this video and
again, most big tech companies will not go too crazy into algorithms, even though a lot of preparation focuses on that. I would focus more on just coding, data structures, solving simpler problems. It's always a question of how much should you look into. I probably made it until the third of it. It's got a lot of maths in it. It's got good content, but I would not recommend this. I have not used any of this advanced knowledge either on my job or on the interviews. So, if you want to spend a bunch of money, just get it. But I recommend grokking algorithms over these two, and also content-wise, you'll be better off. And if you're more senior, you should probably look into some things like system design. The best book I can recommend is The Systems Design Interview, an Insider's Guide. And there's a bunch of online resources and so on that you can look into. Obviously cover the domain basics. Make sure that you're comfortable with the language of your choice. At big tech, you typically can choose whatever language you want to use. So just make sure you know that language pretty well with the primitives, what it supports and what it doesn't support. Just practice. Practice coding, practice whiteboard designing.
Me personally, this is something that makes me sad. Is that we've went from whiteboarding, with just our more digital age, into online code editors. And I've seen more people fail questions in online code editors than I do on whiteboards. And the reason why is that an online code editor tells you if you're wrong, tells you if you've done the thing incorrectly, tells you all the places you've messed up. Whereas a whiteboard, both I, the interviewer, and you, the interviewee, just might simply miss a spot, or we might assume too much, we might do stuff. And I find that you kind of skip some of the smaller details, and I tend to get around to answers much quicker on a whiteboard than I do on a program, because once you're on a program, people want to refactor, they want to make it look nicer. Like, there's all these weird tendencies that end up popping up because you're on an editor versus being on a whiteboard. It's weird. It's just a weird experience I at least personally have observed. I'm not sure if it's universal, but it's definitely something that's unique. See, but the thing is you don't need auto pop-up on a whiteboard, because you just go, I don't know what the API is, so read file. And I'm like, okay, good. Now, if you're at Google, obviously that doesn't work at Google. Google wants you to write perfect code on the whiteboard. Google's stupid, though. Google's been largely stupid. We've all known that. Barring Google, every other place goes, yeah, you're good. You're good. We get it. Read file. We got it, right? It just gives you the
whiteboarding
answer,
is slowly starting to get out of style, but some places just do it. So just look up for the specific company, the preparation advice. And there are some articles that will complain about how much you need to prepare for these interviews. I personally think you prepare once and that knowledge sticks for you for a long time. And by the way, you can start preparing early. You don't need to wait until you are going to go to interview for one of these big companies. The earlier you start, the better. Obviously, having an interview lined up is a great motivator. But if you start inching away and knowing your data structures, your hash maps, your hash tables, your stacks, queues, some of the basic sorting algorithms, etc., you'll have less preparation to do when you decide to interview. The next thing is mindset. The mindset that I've seen work really well, both for me and for candidates who...
By the way, that's a really good piece of advice. If you know how to do a breadth first search, a depth first search, you know how to write binary search, and you know what a linked list and a stack are good for, you pretty much can pass 95% of interviews, and that other 5% is either going to be some obtuse algorithm in which is very unfair they asked, or it's going to be maximum subarray. That's pretty much every single interview is maximum subarray at some point, and you just got to know that algorithm, or just know how to remember it.
Interviewed is treat
dynamic
every
programming.
interview
Yeah,
as a learning
it's always
opportunity
dynamic
and
programming. It's
don't
always
care about
maximum
the outcome.
subarray.
Don't even focus about the outcome. A lot of people go into interviews and they're focused on doing well, and they're really focused on, am I going to make it? Am I going to make it through this interview? But if you turn this around and you go into this interview kind of feeling a bit like an underdog, feeling like, well, I have so much to learn, and I have the opportunity to talk to these smart people who are working at this company, and I'm going to learn something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to go in there with an open mind, and I'm just going to learn. First of all, you're going to get a lot more out of it, because even if you get a rejection, you never expected to go through, or at least you didn't really care about what the outcome was, and you'll definitely take something away. So even if you can't finish the interview, or you get stuck, instead of being stressed out, you're going to ask the interviewer like, that's interesting. So I think I'm stuck here, but do you have any ideas on where I could go? Or do you have any ideas on what I might have missed?
This is super good advice. I love the idea of being less nervous during interview. I don't really get nervous during interviews. There's times where, it happens. I think it happens to everybody no matter how many times you've done it, but I typically don't get nervous. And the reason why is that I go into that interview knowing that I know all my basic stuff. I'm competent enough, and that every problem breaks down to one of those. I just simply need to hear the problem and walk through it, and I'll probably be successful. Long as I just take a step back and just walk through the things I already know. But the thing that's really hard, specifically what he is saying, is he's just like, well, just go in there without the expectation. That's very easy phrase to say when you already have a job. It's a really hard phrase to say? That person that's been doing 1 year of boot camp, followed by another 6 months of just learning all by themselves, who's still living in their mother's basement, they're 30 years old, and they just really want to get something going with their life, and they have to put all this pressure on this one chance they finally got after 400 applications being sent out. Yeah, it's extremely easy to just way overshoot it. You know what I mean? And so I don't like to trivialize it as simple as just don't worry about it. But if you can, just remember, all the pieces. Go through each one of the pieces. You know what I mean? Why is he talking about me? Oh, I know a lot of you guys feel that way, right? Because I hear it all the time. You can't tell someone don't worry, because there's always someone in a position that's very disadvantaged, and they don't get that same luxury of don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's very hard. Yeah, dude, I get it, Soda with Lime. It is very, very hard. And anyone that tells you that simple, one-dimensional, don't worry about it, you'll be just fine, I feel like they've just simply lost a little bit of touch with what it feels like to really struggle. And I
You're
remember
now
that.
turning a conversation into more of a curious one. And also, it just changes the dynamics. You're going to ask a lot more questions from interviewers, which, as interviewers, we love questions. So when I'm interviewing, I love when people treat it as a collaborative exercise. There's this preconception in people's head that you go there to interview, they give you a question, you need to spit out the perfect solution.
All right, we actually do want to do something right here. I find that I stutter an absurd amount, and I also find myself talking in 3x the speed during an interview. You know, whether you love the guy or hate the guy, go watch an interview with Elon Musk. I learned something from watching an interview with him, which is when someone asks him a question, he does not answer immediately. There's no expectation you have to answer immediately. Take a second. Think about what you're going to say. If you find that you go too fast in and you goof up, take a second. No one cares if you take a second. You can even say, and he stutters and shit too. Yeah, everyone does. So it's not a huge deal. But if you take a second, you will stutter less. If you think about the path you want to travel ahead of time, even if you don't think about every last word you want to say, just the path you want to take. I want to talk about A, B, and C. All right, here we go, right? And another thing is, this is just like a lesson from a father. If you're thinking, say you're thinking, right? When someone asks you a question, go, okay, hold on, let me think about that, right? It gives them the identity. It lets them know you're thinking. You're not just like blanking out shit in your pants. You're thinking. Think through your steps. Come up with a 2-step plan and then go, yeah, hey, I'm cooking. Hold on. I'm cooking, bro. Right? Yeah, Zoomers. You say you're cooking. I forgot about that. I'm not a Zoomer yet.
Well, that gives me, as an interviewer, to signal that you can solve the thing somehow. Maybe you just knew the question, by the way. But it doesn't give me anything on teamwork. If I could choose between someone who just did this, they stay quiet for, 5 minutes and then spit out the perfect solution, or someone who talks with me throughout the process. They tell me what they're thinking. They ask me some questions. They confirm that the assumption is correct. I'm going to get a lot more signal from that person, and I'll say, well, this person not only solved it, but they did good teamwork, good communication, which is really important at big tech. At big tech, you're going to work so much with people. Communication is starting to be one of the signals that is a key signal that people are collecting. Basically, people who are not good at communication will have a harder time getting an offer, even if they're good at coding.
So that's a hard one, because I have this thing, which is if something's very simple to you, I don't really expect you to talk a lot. So if somebody's like, yeah, I could do this pretty quick, I don't expect them to do it. If they're like, yeah, I got this, and they just start going, I go, the bro can cook. Cooking, right? Like, it's fine. Go, run, do it. To me, that doesn't matter, because if something's simple, I don't want you to talk to me, right? I don't need to have a fireside chat every single time you get a new problem, right? But if you, on the places you're not sure about, I like it. But if you do that and you go completely quiet and then you completely screw it up, then yes, then it's on you and you've made a huge mistake, right? That's where you've made the worst mistake, which is you didn't communicate, you put a bunch of crap on the screen, and you absolutely made the interviewer have no idea what you're thinking and where you're at. And so either you got to be able to nail it, or you better start asking questions, right? You can't just be going in there trying to do some shrimp fried rice and end with just an egg broken on the floor, right? That would be bad. It's bad news bears.
So just take this mindset and don't just do it for the interview. Do it even before and after. When you talk with a recruiter, tell them that you're super excited to learn.
I have worked with a senior that's not communicative. The thing is that if I ask you to go build a service and you know how to go build a service, I don't need to know about it, right? I need you to come and go like this. Hey, here's the contract that I've decided. And I'll go, okay, that's a good contract. Or I'll say, hey, I don't like that contract. Let's change it up, right? I want you to design things, right? Like, I think that that's the most healthy team you can be on, is when each engineer has autonomy, but decisions are still made at some point together. Because if you feel like you have no ownership, like, right, like imagine I'm your senior engineer and you're over there and you need to build up a service. And I go like this, you need to build up a service, you need to do this, you need to use this, you need to use this. Why aren't you using that? Like, here's your exact API I want you to make. You need to do all these things. I think you would find it's like kind of annoying. And you'd find that you don't have much creative juices in the thing. But if I say, hey, can you go design that system and then go build it? I think you'd be pretty excited, right? I think you'd actually, literally hired Copilot. I think you'd love the freedom. Now, even if you totally train wreck it, you learn more. You think about API. API design is such like an underrated skill. Like, people who can design an API to last for 2 years, they are geniuses, right? I can't even wrap my head around how good they are. Right? And so, like, I want to see that. And so I love trying to give people the freedom to hang themselves as opposed to the freedom where no problems could possibly ever happen, right? And who cares if you mess up? You messed up. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's fix it. Now, obviously, if I do that 20 times with you and you never stop messing up, maybe we got a skill issue, right? We got a skill issue. And it's also scalable. It's highly scalable, right? You get people that can do their own things fast.
You're excited to get feedback. You know there's things that you could get better at, and you'll see where this goes. But do it on the interview as well. So when you introduce yourself, you can just tell that you're excited to be here, you're excited to learn something new, and to solve problems together with the interviewer. When you're doing the problems, don't think about them being stuff. Think about, this is an interesting problem that I didn't come across, and this is so interesting. I wish I knew how to solve it. Let me work with the interviewers to see what I can do. When you finished and you got the solution, don't just stop there and say like, oh, I'm done. Say, I wonder if there's any edge cases I didn't cover. When people ask you how you would productionize the code, you tell them how you do it, and then you turn around and say, but how do you do it at your place? What other things do you do? Do you have canary tests, for example?
Remember earlier when I talked about doing the thing, ask personalized questions?
What does your day look like? Just be curious.
Ask personalized questions. Think about them for 2 seconds. People make connections if you talk to them, right? No one makes a connection with you if you're asked like a PR statement about how does your company do something, right? It doesn't feel very good. But if you ask, how do you do it? How do you do you? People feel more connected. Classic.
Go there wanting to learn something, and you're going to learn a bunch of stuff about how the company works, how those engineers work, and you're going to make a lot better impression. As a hiring manager, and it's not just myself, but most hiring managers, we love curious people. When you go into big tech, you're not going to know half the stuff because the internal systems are different. You've never seen them unless you worked at that company. And even if you did a few years ago, they've changed already. You need to be curious and a fast learner. And those are the type of people who are more likely to get offers as well. So just going with this mindset, focus on the learning and not the outcome. In the worst case, you go to a couple of interviews, you learn a bunch of stuff. Yes, you get rejections, but you learn a bunch of stuff. And then you get an offer at a place where you just knew everything by that time. You've just learned it on the way with interviews. The next advice is pay attention and be fully present. There's a lot of
By the way, interviewing is a skill. So yeah, interview. A little technique I have is if you can get interview, you're a little bit into your career, so you get a little bit easier time getting interviews. Go interview at a couple places you don't like or you don't care if you get the job before you go and do the interviews at the place you want to get it. Even if you've been doing it for a long time, like right now, if I were to go and I wanted to get a job at Streamberry, right? I'm very excited about getting a job at Streamberry. I'd probably go to Basefook first and go talk to Basefook and be like, all right, I'm going to do this interview. Get back into it. Go through the process. Feel all good about it. Then go to Streamberry and try to get that interview. You know what I mean?
Advice videos from people who have cleared interviews at Amazon, Google, Facebook, all these places, and they're going to tell you how to beat the behavioral interview with the hiring manager. That's me. I'm the hiring manager. So let's play this out. Hey, I'm Gergely. I'm a hiring manager at this company. I'll talk a little about myself, about my background. And I've read your CV. I see your experience. Would you mind just briefly summarizing your experience and talk about what motivates you looking ahead? Now, at this point, a lot of people just flip and they realize, okay, intro time, and they do their intro, the stuff that they often have practiced. They didn't pay attention that I asked them to talk briefly about their background and talk about their motivation, what they're excited about, what they're motivated about. And this happens a lot of the time, not just with this specific question, but I might ask them to tell me a situation where they disagreed with someone who was more senior. Some people just start to reach into those examples that they have written down in their head, and they start to recite an example that is closest to that. Now, the people that I really get...
So to be completely fair, this is also the advice everyone has been given, which is to practice all these things. And so it's kind of like, as someone who interviews, you got to totally realize that the person, no matter how much they don't care, they care. And because they care, they're just going to try to be the most polished version of themselves. You'll never meet... It's like a first date. You never meet the real person on the first date, right? Whoever that first date is, it ain't whoever you're gonna have a second date with if you get one, right? It's a very different person, and so it's kind of like, do you expect someone to be super communicative? I mean, that's a very special skill to have, to be able to communicate and be friendly to somebody who you don't know. And, I have a hard time thinking that's necessarily a great skill to always try to hire for, because you kind of only, it's just such a narrow gap. You bring the freak out.
Attention to, and I think these are the people I'd like to work with, are the people who are focused on me. They're not focused on trying to understand the question perfectly with the STAR method, having the situation, the actions, the outcome. They're actually listening to what I'm asking them, and they're having a conversation. And we will often go back and forth and reflect back on previous things. So I do this all the time where
This guy clearly does not hire Arch users. You can see right away.
focus on what that person is saying, and I reflect on what they're saying or what they said before. For example, in their introduction, they might have mentioned that they had this project where they stepped up to add tests to the project where there was none. And a lot later in the interview, I might refer back to that saying, oh, so you mentioned that you added tests at that point. Can we talk a bit more about that, especially in the context of, let's say, mentorship? Did you mentor anyone to add some more tests? Or how did it impact your team? And that's the same thing that I kind of expect from people, but I rarely get, is someone having a focused conversation. This is especially true with the hiring manager or behavioral interview, being present, understanding the question, clarifying it if it's not clear.
It sounds like you pretty much are asking for a different, like, what I'm hearing here is that there's this other form of communication people often do, which is like the 3-question deep style. So instead of having the star thing, when someone, whenever you're having like a conversation, you try to do 3 questions deep. You say something, you hear what they say, and then you follow up on top of that with something deeper and keep getting them to talk. I find personally, the more you can make your interviewer talk, the better you are. And so a lot of my goals is to kind of like flip the script on them and try to hear more about what they do and what they have to say. Because, ultimately at the end of the day, you even heard it straight from this guy right here, which he said, I want to hear them talk about me. I want them to talk to me. I want it, people they like it. I'm just saying.
I see this all too common. I ask a question and people misunderstand it, or they don't know exactly what I'm asking, and they start to answer something. They just take one of their template answers. And it's completely clear. This gives me the signal that you're not a good communicator. It's more important for you to not to lose face than to clarify something. A good example.
I would say that you're not, the thing I don't like about this is you're just not really considering the human element, the nervousness. When you have supreme confidence, when you're in the power position, it's easy to see these things. When you're in the position really, really needing a job, it's just such a different position to be in.
Of this can be a question that I often ask is I ask people if they have a mentor or if they're mentoring other people. And mentoring means different things for different people. Now, some people, the people who pay attention, they will often clarify with me saying, what do you mean under mentoring? And then we have a conversation about mentoring.
I don't think people that are paying attention say that. I think people just simply have definitions, and they go by definitions. This goes with all words you hear. No one really thinks about the words. Like, right, when was the last time you heard someone say terrific? And you're like, now hold on there. You just said terrific, but it has 2 definitions. Do you mean pertaining to terror, or do you mean something that's good? Sorry, in this, I couldn't tell. Is the movie bad, or is it good? I can't tell, right? Like, I couldn't tell because you used a word that has 2 separate meanings to it that we all know about, right? Like, no one does that. Nobody does that. Yeah, Jordan Peterson moment, right? I know that was a very Jordan Petery type answer, right? Well, see when can I do a Jordan Peterson? I don't think I can do an accent by Jordan Peterson. I couldn't. Dang it! I was close. I could almost hear it in my head because once I can hear the voice in my head, then I can do the accent.
And then they're going to tell
it's
me
not Kermit.
what
It's
they did
kind
or
of
what they
Kermit.
didn't do.
That's the problem.
Some people just straight up jump in and they talk about some other thing. For example, might have asked about if they mentor someone, but they misunderstood or they don't know, and they're answering about how they had a mentor or the other way around. These are awkward things, but it shows that you're either not present.
Okay, chat's just wilding out there. Wash your dicks. You see when you. Dang it! I can't do it. But I know there's a lot of this, I think. I think in my head he does this thing, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, I can't do it.
Or you don't understand what I'm saying, or you're hesitant to ask, and most importantly, you're not someone who is really having a conversation. So next time you're going to have a hiring manager interview, a behavioral interview, and even the normal interview, make sure to want to have this conversation. And the mindset of being curious and wanting to learn really, really helps. If you go into the mindset of I want to do well and I want to impress, you're going to be afraid to clarify. Going with the mindset what I want to learn, well, you should probably clarify to make sure we're talking about the same thing. And also, you're going to ask questions.
Again, tell that to somebody who really needs a job. Tell that to somebody who has a kid and doesn't have a job for the last 6 months. Go ahead. Tell that advice. Oh, yeah, don't go in there thinking you're going to do well and you want the job. Don't do that. That's stupid. Right? Good luck on telling somebody that answer. Again, if I could do the inverse, advice, it would simply be you've gone through so many things, and you just simply have to give honest answers. You don't need to sound great. You don't care if you sound bad. Try to be as honest as possible, because that will work 99 out of 100 more than a super polished answer or a completely unprepared, trying to sound good, but you don't know the answer, so therefore you're going to make up something on the spot to be able to be just be honest. Honestly, it's so much better. And it'll make you a little bit more relieved too, because you don't have to be the most polished person, right? There's no polished person at a job. And if you're working at a place that expects only polished people, it's going to be a pretty rough job.
That I see very rarely, and every time it's a huge bonus on the hiring manager interview, is people asking questions of me, not just at the end, but during the interview. So for example, I might ask the person about, all right, well, tell me, how do you do testing at your...
This is the third time he's mentioned talking to him.
Your current company. Do you have automated tests, unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests? What is your thoughts on testing? And then they'll answer, we'll talk through, and then they turn around and ask me, so, by the way, can you tell me, how do you do testing? What is your take on testing? Me, as a hiring manager. Rarely anyone does it, and the people who do it shows they're curious, and they're unafraid to have a conversation in any setting. It's not just unafraid, they're actually curious to do it. So just do this, be fully present, worry less about how you'll be perceived, and have the conversation with the interviewer, the hiring manager, the design interviewer, the coding interviewer, etc. The next insight is...
I wish I had some water right now. I don't have water, and I'm just jonesing for it.
Interviews are a two-way street. You're probably feeling that you're being interviewed, but you should also interview the company. So you should not be afraid. At the end of every interview, you should ask questions. You should imagine, what if you're getting an offer? Do you want to work here? And there's no better place to talk than with the engineers or with the hiring manager. And I think you should ask, honestly, questions that you care about. For example, when I worked at Uber in 2017 and we had this terrible press, some of the best candidates, they asked straight on. They asked, is the culture as rotten as it seems? And what do you think? Why are you still here if the culture is like this?
I actually do like that. I like when people say, I heard Netflix fires fast. Is this true? Right? They got a little bit of girth to them. You know, ask those questions that maybe make you a little bit more uncomfortable. I like that. I like it. Hey, Bisco.
And I thought that was fair questions. It was honest. They asked what they wanted to know. And, would you want to work at a place where you're unsure about certain things? So you can ask hard questions. Obviously, do it with good language and some of the professional skills. But you should ask about the things that are important to you. If diversity is important, ask about that. If work-life balance is important, ask about that as well. Figure out what is important for you. Learning, having budgets to go to conferences, people sharing knowledge, etc., etc., etc. Figure out what is important for you. Get your dream list of what company you'd love to work at, and reverse interview the company at the end of each interview. Now, one of the last points is these interviews will feel really exhausting, especially if it's in a setting where you do actually go on site. Right now it's COVID, so it's probably going to be virtual interviews, and they likely will not be one after the other. These interviews don't fully represent what it's like working at these companies, but they can represent some of the more crunch times. So there will be days, especially if you're in a more senior position, where you will have even 2 of these interviews a day, multiple meetings. You'll have to get your code in there. You're on call. There's now an alert. So I remember that both my Uber and Facebook interviews were really exhausting, and some of my Uber days later were also similarly exhausting to what I felt at the interviews. Not all of them, not the majority of them, but some of them. So just know that big tech often has a higher pace, especially when you are on call, which is pretty common at these places. Also, when you have deadlines, it's not true anywhere. So when I talked about this topic with other hiring managers and people working at companies, some people are saying they don't think the stress of the interview represents the stress of the day-to-day. Especially people from Google said this. I've heard some people from certain Amazon teams say the same thing. So maybe it's not true, but I would prepare that big tech pays well and is exciting and you're working on big things, but it can be stressful.
I agree with that. That's why it's a very good thing to learn how to say no. Learn how to fight for your own sanity. I think a lot of people, especially when they're new, they just want to impress somebody. So they go, and every time they're given a task, they go and work for 16 hours straight, and they get it done. And then they send it to you. And then you critique it. They feel horrible because it wasn't great. But again, they just spent 16 hours power coding and just, ejaculated out an answer. And then you finally go through that cycle, and they solved it really quick. And then you're like, oh, okay, that was really, really good. You're obviously very, very fast. You did that in such short time. Here's another thing. They do it again. They do another super high paced, whatever it's called, and they just do it over and over and over again to themselves, where they develop this perception of them that they're super fast, but they're not necessarily super fast. They're just working an unbelievable amount of hours. So make sure you always, you don't need to kill yourself to do something. Understand the culture you're in, but you also, if your first job ever, if it's your first job ever and you're trying to get somewhere, there is something to be said about working more and working hard. You know what I mean? You really got to, you want to be able to learn as much as you can when you're first starting out, especially when it comes to everything involving working at a company. So you kind of have to, you got to balance that. And, people will always bring up burnout. One big thing about burnout is that you can't, I personally find this works, and I've had enough people say something similar that I think it's really good. Make time to investigate and build things that you're just interested in. And I find that what that does is it just helps burnout kind of subside. It really is. It really helps you kind of avoid a lot of those things because you're doing things that still interest you. Because at your job, let's just face it, I like to garden. I don't want to go do hardscaping for other people, right? Those are two very different things. Even though you could be doing the exact same thing physically, you could still be setting down the exact same little concrete path, whatever you're doing. But doing it for yourself versus doing it for someone else generates very different feelings. And so it's the same thing with programming. Take the time to do things for yourself, the things you want to build, the things you want to do, and it will kind of refresh the entire thing. Because then you don't just have this one hole you keep going into where it kind of feels meaningless.
Sometimes it's more often stressful, sometimes it's just every now and then spikes. And finally, as for my last insight, some people think after they get a rejection, oh, I just wasted a bunch of time with this interview. I prepared so much. I went to this on-site. It's just time wasted. It's not time wasted. You always gain experience.
Yep.
I've had some failed interviews that I'll talk about on this channel if there's interest, where I didn't get an offer and I got the expertise that I needed to get that offer for the next job. So Uber's a great example. I would have not gotten into Uber if I would have not interviewed at so many places before, and I got experience every single time, even when I got an offer and also when I didn't get an offer. I would think of every interview as an opportunity to get experience. It's a great experience to have. You talk with smart people. Now, if you don't get any interviews, the option is for you to pay for mock interviews, which will be not the same thing. You're not going to get real feedback. People will try, but they'll do the best. And it costs a bunch of money. I think it costs $150 to
You can always just have a friend. I'm not going to lie to you. Getting a mock interview is not hard if you have friends, especially friends in software, because guess what? They'll probably want a mock interview too, especially when you're first starting out. If you're in college your senior year, you know how easy it is to do mock interviews? It's like as easy as it gets. Every last person wants a job. Every last person's looking for a job. Go. Do the thing.
$300 per interview, something like that. So just think about that. Whenever you're going to an interview, you could be paying to do a mock interview if you didn't get the specific interview. Just going with this mindset.
But noob interviewer isn't helpful feedback. Sure. But it is very helpful for you to formulate your thoughts and try to talk to somebody, right? What are friends? Is Linux my friend? Yes. But I really think about it. If you haven't even practiced the art of talking through a problem to somebody else, being on a whiteboard, you have to go through that emotions first. It's going to feel kind of funny. You're going to feel funny, right? You go in front of your friend on a whiteboard, you're going to feel some level of nervousness. You're going to feel a little bit of kind of out of placement. Good. Feel that now so you don't feel that small part in an interview, or you'll feel less of that in an interview. You'll be more prepared for the feeling. It always feels funny the first time.
You're going to learn a lot.
In fact, there's a song about it. It feels like the first time, okay? The very first time.
More, you're going to see how the interviews work, and best of luck. If you have questions about big tech interviews, just feel free to pop them in the comments. I'll either try to answer what I can, or I might make some videos on these. If you enjoy this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm posting on software engineering and engineering management topics. Please follow along if you enjoy this. Thanks.
A great video. I think there's a lot of great things, but like I said, the only thing I think that was not done well there was just the mentality of the person coming in. I think is not the right mentality. I think that only works for people that already have a secure position, and so just something to think about. The name is the Primogen.